Okay. All right. So this is the DFWmobile.net user group. If this is your first time here, welcome. We focus on mobile technologies, not necessarily just .NET, but anything that can interact with .NET. So if you're using a .NET service, we'd love to hear from you. If you're new, you can follow us on Twitter at DFWMobileNet, or go to our website at DFWmobile.net. This is our leadership team. We couldn't be here without these guys. And this is the Connect Hackathon I was telling you guys about, Computer Visionaries. Their website is computervisionaries.org. The hackathon is going to be at the DEC, and it's July 18th through 19th. Be sure to check it out. We were going to have this for the next meeting. I haven't updated Meetup yet. We're going to have a show and tell, so anybody who's done any mobile work can come and show off their app, show off their hard work. You can plug your app for sales if you want. Just be prepared to talk about how you implemented it. It doesn't have to be a long talk either. So we were going to have a next meeting, but we're not going to now. It'll be probably in September. If you would go out and comment on the meetup, or send me an email and let me know if you do want to talk. That way we can have whatever prepared, whether it's an adapter for the projector here or a camera for your phone, so that we can display the phone over the projector. So let us know. Oh, and whoever comes to me first gets to talk first, so get your info in early so you can actually present early. I'm your speaker today. Yeah, you have to put up with me, sorry. I'm a senior programmer and team lead for Infinity Interactive, Xamarin certified developer, and a father of two and a husband. Today we're going to talk about Xamarin.Forms. I'm not going to read the doc description to you. Hopefully you've already read it if you signed up for the meeting. All right, so who here is familiar with Xamarin?
Yeah, I have one quick question.
Yes.
How do you become a Xamarin certified developer? What did you have to do to get qualified for that?
I had to pass a test. It was offered by Xamarin. I don't know what the current requirements are.
It's the same test.
It's the same test? You have to pay to take it, though,
Yes.
right?
You need the free one from the conference like this?
Yes. Yeah. So if you went to Evolve last year, you got a free chance to take the test to pass. If you pass, you're certified. It's just like any other certification, except you have to go through their online center. It's not like you can go to one of those test sites that a lot of Microsoft certifications have. So it's online. I don't know if they track whether you're on the screen or not or anything like that. It is professionally done. It's not some survey monkey thing. So, so pretty much everyone here is familiar with Xamarin. I'm not going to go too much detail into Xamarin itself. Previously with Xamarin, we were able to build with the shared backend business logic code and then UI-specific C# code, which would create your native UIs. And now with Xamarin.Forms, you can share all of your code across all platforms for 100%. Well, 100% plus the pre-generated code, which you don't actually have to write yourself. So here's a little infographic of the traditional approach. You got the separate UIs, it's all in C#, and then the shared backend, which is up to somewhere in the neighborhood of 75% of your code, dealing with web API or RESTful services and web services and all that lovely stuff, and sharing settings. Now you've got the shared UI code with Xamarin.Forms, and you still have that native control. It isn't like a lot of the cross-platform code generation where you write HTML and it spits out the exact same thing across every every platform, which tends to have bad UI reviews, performance problems, that sort of thing. Go away, preview. Sorry. Oh, right. All right. Let's quickly build user native. I'm going to plug my mouse. Sorry, guys. All right. Xamarin.Forms elements map to native controls and behavior. And you can mix and match Xamarin.Forms with native API. So if you want to write your own view control for iOS, you can do that. You can go in between the two. You can also write custom renderers for specific controls. So say you've got, if you wanted a more customized entry like watermarking or something like that, you could actually go in and write your own entry control, and we'll get into that later, or show you the entry control. That you can render it how you want in Android, how you want in iOS, and how you want it in Windows. So you're not stuck to the preconceived controls that they've written for you. There's 40+ page layouts, controls, and all that. You can do build from code behind. If you're familiar with writing an iOS app, the UI is typically written in code behind. Not too many people use storyboards or zips with Xamarin. It's very similar to that. Or you can actually write XAML, and it is a custom XAML. You can't just take XAML from Windows Phone or Windows 8 and shove it into a Xamarin app. You have to use their XAML. They do come with two-way data binding for their controls, so you can do data binding with an MVVM model. There's navigation, animation API, dependency services, messaging services. So the dependency services, if you've ever done injection of inversion of control, and you're familiar with dependency services and messaging center, these all kind of go hand in hand with MVVM. So the 5 pages, you've got content, master detail. If you're familiar with flyout navigation or hamburger menus, that's the master detail. They're the way they're doing it. The navigation at the top, and then tabbed pages, which consist of a lot of the iOS apps with tab pages, and then the carousel, which is kind of a new thing that they have for iOS. And then you have different layouts. You've got the stack layout, which if you've ever written a XAML app, you're probably familiar with stack panel. Absolute layout, I would recommend staying away from this. It looks pretty funny across platform, but you can give it a try. Relative, and then grid, content view, scroll view, and frame. And then here are the controls. You got the activity indicator, which is like a progress wheel, spinning wheel, box view, buttons. If you notice the view names in there, it's kind of along the iOS methodology and naming. If you're looking for the text box, it's the entry, and then the multi-line text box would be an editor. And you can actually do native maps with map control and a web view for web browser. And then for tables, you've got all the different cells. So let's hop over to the demo. I'm going to plug my mouse in and see if I can get this to work for you guys. By now they'd have a better way of inserting a USB cord. It's only version 3, right? All right. So let's go over to Visual Studio. Now you can create these projects in XAML Studio, but I'm going to do all of the demos in Visual Studio because that's what I use. So in order to create one of the Xamarin Forms, you go to New Project. Typically you start out in Visual C#. Hopefully you like C#. Xamarin doesn't really support Visual Basic, but it does support F#. Before you go into iOS to get to your Xamarin apps or Android, but there's a new category now called mobile apps, and that's where you're going to find the Xamarin Forms projects. Who here is familiar with the shared project? The new project type is shared. Okay. So they came out with this shared project that does file linking. Kind of automates file linking. Honestly, I don't recommend using it. IntelliSense really doesn't work. Things like go to declaration doesn't work. It's kind of a pain. But if you really hate file linking and don't like PCLs, then that is the way to go. So it automatically creates 4 projects for you. You've got the shared project, Android, iOS, and Windows Phone. Right now they only support Windows Phone 8.0.
Sure about that? I think I'll be doing the one on you later.
They only officially support, wait, okay, so it's a Windows 8.0 app, but you can run it on 8.1. You might be able to retarget to 8.1, but they don't. I haven't seen anything indicating that they support it. I've seen support for Windows 8. So use at your own risk. Now you will notice out of the box there is a bug in generation. And I'm going to show you how to fix this real quick. The product ID and the publisher ID are incorrect. So this is a really odd thing. I don't know why they haven't caught this already.
I have seen that.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I just updated today, and the previous version
Yeah, okay.
was acting out too.
What?
But I don't know what. So you go ahead and open it. It gives you an error, unable to load manifest. You manifest in an XML editor, and then it'll ask you to close it. And so there's this little XML attribute that needs curly brackets. And the squiggly line goes away. And then the publisher ID does as well. And I won't bore you with the details of why that doesn't work. It has to do with the schema. So now let's try to run this again. And we get our lovely Windows Phone emulator. And we have our little hello forms. Which is just a label. And I'm going to go ahead and start my Android emulator in the background. Which I had this started earlier, but there was something that made me restart, and I forgot to start it back up. Yes, yes. And Google Android emulators are slow. Thanks for telling me. Can everybody see that? Or does it need to be bigger? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. Yep. Oops, if I select the right emulator.
I was about to say you're on pin.
Yeah. Yes, it's slow. Close. This one. Okay. I'll hop over here, ignore my numbers. I have to change that later on. So if any of y'all are wondering, I'm running a little Mac Mini under the podium. Even though I have a MacBook, I'm using Boot Camp instead of Parallels because 90% of my work is in Windows. I don't know why I should be a second-class citizen. That and Hyper-V and Parallels don't mix very well. All right, close the other one. All right. Of course, TeamViewer would freeze up on me. Okay. So if you're not familiar with Xamarin shared projects, why is this not working? No, it's not. So you work with me. So typically there is a drop down here that says Android, iOS, or Windows Phone. If you've ever worked with shared files, what it is there's one file, but the project is looking at this one file in all the different projects. So the Android project is looking at one file, the iOS project is looking at that file, and the Windows Phone project is looking at that file. And it'll show up just in the project itself. It would be down here with any of the other files. And you would use preprocessor, the if, def, and all that to determine if it was Windows Phone. Or iOS or Android. Let me pull the property out. So the conditional compilation symbols for each project. You got iOS, and then Android. What? Why is it blank? That's interesting. That allows you to determine which code to compile for that project. Why is that not? Okay, let me try a new one. New project. Share.
So do you know if the Xamarin.Forms plays nicely with MVVM cross or just MVVM?
So you can use MVVM Cross, you can use MVVM Lite. There's some blog posts out there that they've gone and done projects with MVVM, the different MVVM frameworks. I think Cheese Baron did the MVVM cross demo. He wrote a custom presenter, and that's how he's using the MVVM cross. I didn't read the MVVM Lite one because I don't usually use that framework. I use the cross, but it does work. And that'll teach me to update before demo. So yeah, avoid shared. PCL is already proven to work fairly well with Mono and Xamarin. So we're just going to open up my demo and go through Xamarin.Forms. All right. So instead of coding in front of everybody, I've gone through and made git commits. If you're wondering what this little tool is, it's source tree. I've gone all the way back to when I created the project. So this is a out-of-the-box new project, no additional code here. And we're going to go ahead and skip running it because the issue with Windows Phone, and we're going to step up to fix the Windows 8 project, Windows Phone 8 project. And go ahead and start that. Let's, oh, maybe I won't. Okay, so while that's starting to run, so the typical project has this app class, and it starts out with the get main, a static get main, and it returns a type of page, which is what all the pages inherit from. And in this case, we're setting the content to label, and we set the text in various options here. And then in order to make this work in different environments, it's set page, well, it's initializing it, and it's doing a set page, and it's getting that page. It generates all the activities, or view controls, or XAML pages. In the case of iOS, we get that main page and create view controller. And this is C#. You don't have to do it this way. You could do something other than app since the code is right here, which is nice if you have some other way of doing it. Say if you had a setting that determined which page you start on, like you didn't want the user to come back to the app in the same place, then you could do it right here. And then get main or whatever you want to call it. You don't have to call it app either. And then for Windows Phone, it's in the main page, .xaml. You convert the page UI elements. And if you want to look at the main page, there's nothing there. There's no XAML here. You could add something like an ad control here if you wanted. I don't know how you'd want to do it in Android and iOS, but that's typically where the ad control goes. I do know that someone's released an ad control for Xamarin.Forms. I haven't played with it much though. All right, so let's see if this is starting. And there's our hello forms. back up to app. So next, I'm going to go ahead and show you that you can change it from get main. And we're going to use a static property. And feel free to ask any questions at any point during the demonstration. So what I've done here is I went and changed page, the property from get main. So if home page is null, then new dot and store it, and then return it. And then I just updated these items here to use home page. Not mean to hit start. App delegate and the main activity. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Well, for Android, we know how Android has activities. Is that being replaced by the page object in Xamarin.Forms, or is it still, do you still have the concept of the activity?
It's basically replacing the
Okay.
activity. You can still use activities and pages if you want.
You can mix and match them.
I don't know if we'll get to that point tonight. Probably not.
That's fine.
So let's go ahead and look at stack layout. So who here has done XAML development? Anyone? 2 people? 3? 4? All right. So this is very similar to a stack panel, and once you see it, you'll recognize it. So I've put home page out here, and it inherits from content page. So it's like newing up a new content page. And then the constructor, I've added a stack panel, and you can set the orientation just like a stack panel. Oh, sorry, this is a stack layout. You can set the orientation just like a stack panel. I've created an image and a label, and these are controls. I didn't create an image. And then I added it to the stack layout and set the content of the page as a stack layout. Now you can have layouts inside of layouts, so it's not just limited to the content. But for a content page, you're going to have a layout to have sub or child controls. Let's go ahead and run this. Android. You know what? I may not have committed that. File. Oh, I know what it is. I committed the file inside the project. So. No, I didn't commit the file. All right, sorry about that. Just give you. And there's our stack panel. Images do act a little strangely in stack panel. If you have multiple labels, they'll stack on top of each other. If you want to see. Help supplies and stuff, the project. there's the double label. And then you can switch it to horizontal. So there's several options of where the stack layer can start out on the horizontal. Scan. You can do center, center expanded, all these different things. Also, when you're doing a vertical one, you have vertical options as well.
Layout options.
Hmm?
Layout options.
That's right. Right. Which you can see are very similar. We're the same. Sorry. The options. Sorry, I'm used to my keyboard at home, not the Mac keyboard. There's the vertical.
Do you use async and await on all the platforms?
Yes, so it does support async. Anyway, the Xamarin had that since Evolve last year.
At least.
Yeah.
So is it running .NET 4.5? Maybe?
Wow.
Yeah, it's compatible with 4.5. I don't think they have compatibility with 4.5.1 yet.
Oh, running 4.5.
So. Okay. Then there's the absolute layout, which I'm going to show you why that's a bad idea. So I wrote and now with the absolute layout, you have the children.add again, but now you have a new point, which is the position on the screen. And it shows up a little like this. But you can also run it in Android. Let me make sure I have the file in there correctly. Oh, and there's something else that you should be aware of. When you're using Xamarin.Forms and you reference an image, you have to take into consideration all the platforms, and this dash here doesn't work for Android. And so when I rename it there, I have to rename it here. and here. So you have to think about these things. The error that it gives is like appt.exe, exit code 1. Then you have to go look at the stack trace and all that. But it's unpleasant. So there's your absolute layout. It's something to think about. The better choice would be a relative layout. So let's go back to our this.
Which one would you recommend, Sean, to do this? Would you recommend doing the code side, the code behind, or the actual XAML?
I'll show you the XAML in a second. I would recommend doing the code behind. Going back to that IntelliSense thing, if you've ever used something like ReSharper or whatever, and XAML, they've got pretty good IntelliSense.
Okay.
But not for Xamarin.Forms. At least not the version I have. It's kind of painful. If you have problems with it, it's sometimes gives you an error and sometimes it doesn't.
Well, and then a lot of times it gives you an error at runtime and not a compile time.
Okay.
It doesn't check if those have been resources,
Okay.
so it doesn't do it till it renders.
Does it have something to do with, I guess, the formatting, or it just doesn't recognize something?
What I've seen on the forums is they have a quote, it's actually something Microsoft did. It's quote unquote, they have to fix it, whatever it is.
And there's no designer for it. The designer
Yeah,
doesn't show up.
so it's all by hand.
So all the nice things that you have in XAML don't happen for Xamarin.Forms. And you definitely can't use Blend.
Okay.
So kind of defeats the purpose of having XAML, but all right, so I went ahead and fixed the image of my code. And then so let's take a closer look at the controls. I really wish the magnifier wouldn't add stuff. What's the point of a shortcut key anyway? All right, so I went ahead and added to the label font. If you don't want to change the font that you're using, say having the same font across all the platforms tends to be frowned upon as a design standard. They kind of want you to use the correct one for the system. So you can use of size, which allows you to set the font, which I don't recommend, and then whatever the font size you want. Or you can use system font of size and provide the size. And they have name size enum, which has large, medium, micro, and small. Or you can put in a number. And they also have bold. So if you want to bold, let's go back to what it was. All right. instead of a width, you have a width request. It doesn't always show up as the width you request. It depends on your environment, your layout. You have different vertical options, horizontal options for center and expand, background color, and text alignment. I did notice that the Y line doesn't work for label anyway. And then also, I didn't point this out earlier, when you're doing an image, use image source. Which allows you to have multiple options from file, from resource, from stream, from URI. So if you wanted to pull down an image from the web, I would use from URI. You can also bind it. For now, we're just going to use the built-in one. I don't. Let's see. Okay. When you do add an image to the Windows Phone, you need to put it in the root of the project. As the root of the image. I haven't messed around with folders with that. You might be able to add a folder here. I haven't tried it yet. But the important thing is that you set the property build action to content. If you don't do that, it can't find the image. And it will show nothing. And it fails silently, which is good and bad. On iOS, you need to put it in the resources folder. And you need to, well, you don't have to, but you can do the Retina image naming standards, and then we'll pick that up. And then also in drawable, but you need to make sure that that's an Android resource. So sometimes it sets this automatically, sometimes it doesn't. I think it depends on how you copy and paste it in there. I haven't quite nailed that down.
I have a question. Why do you have the image, the logo? It's a public property. No, it's a public field. What is it?
It's a file.
No, but on line 13, public image logo. Does it have to be like a field of the class, or?
No, it doesn't. It could be, the scope doesn't matter as long as when you add it to the children, it's fine. If you want to access it later, you definitely need to have it outside the scope. Because navigating a list is not pleasant. The other thing I want to point out is that you set the title. You can set the title for a page, and that comes important with carousels and tabs and master detail pages. And then the icon as well. And the icon has the same rules about it. It has to be an Android resource. It has to be in the drawable. Follows the same standards you would for putting an image in an Android app. Resources. And the image build action for iOS is bundled resource. So the files do have to go. They can't be an importable file unless you set it up as a. I think you can pull the embedded file from the DLL. I don't recommend it because the advantage is that you can optimize the image for the platform. So you would want to be able to have like the Retina image in the iOS app. Because I'm about to show you why in a little bit. But you definitely, if you're having icons and things of that nature, put them in the project for that platform. Let's go to tabbed. So I went ahead and changed this to main page, if anybody was paying attention. And we have a new type called dashboard. And that inherits from the tabbed page. And this will generate a tab for iOS, a tab view for iOS, the correct tab view for Android and Windows Phone. So I'll show you each platform if I can get my team viewer to work. Here's the tab view. If you're familiar with Windows Phone apps, that's how they do tabs. Using the same page twice, that's why it looks that way. But you can go around independently. And then Android, that's the tabs at the top. It's loading the second. All right, so we have the tabs at the top. I'll show you the iOS. Well, I guess do it through VNC. It's a lot slower than TeamView. I'll warn you now. Typically, I do this over a gigabit switch, so it's a lot faster. Another thing to note is that you want to come in here and switch it to simulator if you want to use the iPhone emulator. Otherwise, you have to have a device attached. You can do it here, but kind of messes everything up. So you want to look at Configuration Manager, go to your iOS project, and select the iPhone simulator. And then figure out where your iOS. Okay, so here's my iOS simulator selector. Normally I have a higher resolution too, so it's not hidden. VNC. All right, well, we'll try that later.
Just Just shut down the simulator and just rerun RAM.
Okay,
It does that. I don't know, no pattern.
there it is.
What is it?
So if you look down here, these are kind of fuzzy. That's why you want the retina icons. But the tabs are on the bottom. I'll actually show you that switching later once I add some other pages. So I added another content page to show up entry. Entry is a text box, if you're familiar with that. That's what it is in ASP.NET and different platforms. So I've got 3 entries here. And I'm putting them in a stack layout. Go ahead and run that. Okay, so let me stop that. Start without debugging. Let's be a lot quicker. So we had the standard text box that we get for iOS. This is loaded. The standard data entry text box that you have for Android. And the standard text boxes for Windows Phone.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, do those all talk to the same database? Like,
I haven't put the database into it.
okay, but is it going to? I mean, is that what the goal is? So,
Well, so in standard traditional Xamarin, you'd have the business logic and a portable class library or using file linking or whatever. And that's where you do the data database access and going back and forth between the database. So in this case, you're just this is just the UI. We're just focusing on the UI.
right.
So, and if we were to do that, we would add a button. Right. And backspace would work. And then you do your database access right here. Or if you're using MVVM, you execute a command or bind to a command, and then that would do your database layer code. Does that make sense?
Yes, and that's one of the main reasons why people use Xamarin is because you build one unit or one resource that talks to one database, right? Or
Right.
one version.
Yeah, so you'd have your shared core data access layer logic, whether it's a RESTful service or a database or whatever. And then you would share that across all your platforms. And that's standard with all Xamarin. That's not specific to Xamarin.Forms.
That's a good question. Like, what kind of database would you use if I want to use a database across all the three devices?
SQLite.
SQLite?
If you want it on the device itself, the database on the device, then you'd use SQLite.
Is there any other?
Yeah, there's some examples. And then they just came up with that Windows Azure offline mode, and there's an example out there for that too.
And it works in iOS.
There's also other couch-based, like that's what it is. So if you're into doing like something similar to Mongo, or just non-relational data, you can do that as well.
Yeah. If you're looking on how to implement this in Xamarin, how to access like a RESTful service or whatever, we've got some videos of previous meetings that I would definitely recommend checking out. Right now, we're just focusing on the UI. So we're not really doing data access or anything like that. So that's pretty standard to .NET. It doesn't really change too much when you're going to Xamarin. You do want to take into consideration that you don't want to use your user's internet connection all at once. You want to do bulk updates and things of that nature, or bursts. You don't want to just sit there and constantly stream data down. But it's, for the most part, it's the same. You have HTTP client and modern HTTP client. I think it's the other one, big one. JSON, all that. JSON.NET. Unionsoft is the other name for it. But if you have any questions about that, let me know afterwards. But right now, we're going to focus on the UI. So going back to how I set this up, I just have the entry, size, layout options, and then I add it to my layout. So it's pretty simple. There's nothing really complicated going on here. You can, of course, add events to it and bind to it. So if you want to do like a text change, if you want to do a watermark or something like that, like if they click into the field, is 3 of them focused? Yeah. Unfocused, you could clear the watermark, if it's equal to the watermark or whatever. And it just generates that code there, or that UI there. So any questions about that? Okay. So, the next thing I want to take a look at is list view. If you've ever had to deal with data, you're going to have a list view. Whether it's like a list of contacts or sales or something like that, you're going to have a list view. So I added a list page to my tab page. And I've got my title here again, this list, got my icon. Something to take into note is padding. It's very similar to CSS, it's padding around any UI elements that are going to be inside that page. It's very important when you're using iOS, otherwise it's going to be up in your connection bars, which looks really ugly. So I've got a new list view, setting the row height. I've got an item source and a template. I'll get into that in a second. Item source, it's just, in this case, I'm just calling a function. You can have whatever you want in here, a RESTful service, a database call, whatever you want that you can do with .NET or C#. And I'm just returning a list of Twitter handle, which is a custom class. Which is, it's got display name, Twitter, image URI. And that's just a POCO, plain old C# object. Nothing special about it, no attributes. And then I have my data template, which if you're familiar with messing around with iOS, you've got cells. Which this looks very similar to what we were doing before, creating an image. And this is binding. I don't think we're going to be able to get that far tonight. Setting the image width, just like any UI control. And then I've got my name layout over here, which is yet another stack layout. So we're having a layout inside of a layout, basically. So we've got the stack, we've got the view layout, which has got the image, and then we've got the child layout, which has got the name and the Twitter handle. And these are just labels. There's nothing fancy. It's more UI of the same UI controls. Back to this page, and then we set the content to this page.
But is it mandatory to use icon template?
No.
I don't think so. It's if you have a list of strings, it'll look fine. I think if you have a list of custom objects, it's going to look funky. So
Easier.
yeah. If it's just strings, then don't mess with item template. But if it's a custom object, yeah. Otherwise, it's going to look like the two-string, and that's not pretty. Let me go ahead and run this. So I got the data entry in my list, which has got that image, display name, and Twitter handle. Everybody see that? It's kind of small.
Where does the binding actually happen? Is it the contact people or
So I'm setting up the binding here. I'm telling it what property to set. I'm creating a new binding. And this is telling it what property from the data item to set. So the image URI maps back to this image URI right here. I gotta figure out a way to do the shortcut. The image URI, and if you come down to this child layout, display name, Twitter, and those are being bound to these labels. Does that make sense? Are you familiar with MVVM? Okay. So they do have a basic MVVM engine in here. That you do have to implement via notify change yourself, so it gets kind of ugly. It's a lot easier when someone else has already done it for you. So let's take a look at that list view in iOS. I have B and C. Yeah, I don't recommend doing iOS development over Wi-Fi. Just switch over to Android. So what MVVM frameworks do you guys use? Anybody here use MVVM Cross? MVVM Lite? Reactive UI? Okay. So here's our list. It's going to take a second to load up those images. There they are. And that's the Android rendering of it. Any questions on that? List view? Like I said, you could do it with a list string. I just recommend, if you're going to do anything more complex than that, then definitely go with the cell. And the cell inherits from view cell. So just create a class, implement that. Let's go on to the next stage. That's what people asked last meeting about XAML. Like I said, I did play around with it. I don't recommend it. It does look just like the XAML you're familiar with. Get the XML namespace, just like XAML. The binding is similar, but no IntelliSense. Maybe they'll have it eventually. I haven't tried playing with it on Xamarin Studio. It does create this code behind as well. And for whatever reason, it thinks it doesn't exist. The code generation, the generated code, if you've ever messed with it, it's like the g.i.cs in your objects folder.
I've never been a big fan of coding out my my UI, my layout.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer to use the front end stuff, but I guess it's
Well, XAML or XML is just another language.
yeah.
It's,
No, yeah,
it's extensible markup language.
right.
I don't remember what XAML stands for. But anybody here now? Yeah, no, never bothered to learn what it stood for, the acronym. It's just another. If there was a designer with it, then that would be something. But there's not even a button for it. There's no option. I think no, it's this way. Prior to this update, at some point, it did show the XAML designer, and it just errored out. I don't know if they intend to implement it or not.
Oh, did you?
But you can add it's the same names, it's the class names, just like XAML, button, image, all that stuff. And it has bindings. Let me go ahead and show you my XAML example. So this is a list view. Oh, and if you go on their website, I had this little mistake. If you copy their example, it says is visible equals false. So I spent half an hour trying to figure out why my list view wasn't showing up. They do have some other things in their examples that you kind of have to have the original project, I guess. Like twitter.font was in here. But this is the item template, data template, and view cell. Y'all remember the view cell we were just looking at? XAML mirrors class structure. And then we have our view. If you go back to the cell, right? instead of setting the content like we do on a page, we set the view with the layouts, and it's just it's how it renders, knows what to render. If you don't set that, you don't get anything. And in the XAML, it's the same way. You got the .view, view cell, and then we have in stack layout. I keep wanting to call it stack panel. Image, and then this other stack layout. Let me run this on Windows Phone. So it's the same. There's nothing different about the way it renders. And, well, you do get some compiler errors beforehand.
There seem to be more bugs in their example implementations from what I've seen in the forums, but there are a lot of guys, people that are coding it versus code behind.
Yeah. Well, if you go and look at Xamarin examples, most of them are going to be in the code behind. There's not too many people writing AXML or zibs or storyboards, just because it's, I guess, easier. Mainly, I think that is probably because to do the designer, you had to run Xcode, and switching between Xcode and Xamarin Studio was painful. So a lot of people have started out in the code behind, and so most of the examples are written for code behind, so new developers write the code behind. So yeah, I definitely stick with the code behind. I'm going to leave 7 more minutes for questions. Looking at anything else.
That update for the day, was that just for Xamarin? What was it? It didn't include forms, did it? It was just for the main package?
You know, I don't remember how to get to the release notes. Let's see here. I know they pop up whenever I install the update.
Yeah.
I've never actually gone and looked for them.
Right.
The Xamarin.Forms themselves is actually a NuGet package.
Right.
So you have your 2 libraries here, your core and your XAML. Let me start the project. Manage NuGet. And it gets updated through NuGet. I don't know if they install updates. Yeah, see, I'm behind. And this
Which
project.
one is it? Still 1.1?
1.1.1.
Yeah, that's the last one.
Yeah, this is the one I'm running.
Yeah.
Is that the beta or alpha?
No, they shipped they shipped a full version.
Okay.
They didn't actually call it a beta.
Yeah, typically, Xamarin did this very different than most of their stuff. They typically leave it in the alpha channel for a while, but I think since NuGet's new to them.
I thought it was such a radical new technology that they wanted to ship the whole thing. But yeah, they have different update channels, so they have the alpha,
Right.
beta, and then stable. And usually they throw everything into the alpha channel. This wasn't an alpha at all. This is like a beta invitation only.
Okay.
So I don't know if I'd write or release a production app.
That's what I was going to ask you. Based on what you know, would you be willing to switch over your UI development to this versus sticking to what Android does?
I've been thinking about changing one of my projects over to it that I've been working on. I'm definitely not going to touch the XAML. But it's a fairly simple app. It's just a list of employee contacts, things like that. It's nothing too complex.
Yeah, I think it would depend on what your app is, because you're already, I mean, it is brand new. I mean, they came out with 2 updates in a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah, I wouldn't release it something that you're going to expect to make money off of it. So if it's something that's mission critical or it's something you're trying to sell, I wouldn't release it yet. It does cover most of what I would do in mobile development, though. I mean, you can't write a game in it. But
But simple stuff like editable list views are not there.
Data entry, collection,
Yeah, data entry's there, but like you have a list view, you can click on something and pop up the data entry screen. That's all built in, all ready to go. But like on iOS, hitting the edit button, flip it into edit mode. Well, that's going to be different in all three platforms.
Right.
So that's not there at all.
Okay.
So if you have a table of things you want to just edit the tables, you have to write that yourself.
I have seen a lot of people are writing the custom wrappers. I've already seen like 3 or 4 on the forums. So there's definitely a lot of community-driven development going on around this. So I definitely see this going forward and being supported.
You can learn a lot about how they did things by like using just decompile and opening up their specific. So they have a core DLL and they have specific ones for each platform.
Okay.
You can learn a lot about how they did, such as opening it up and looking at the classes.
Okay.
Writing a custom is not hard. I mean, I've got a drawing app that's across all three, and it just surfaces the native, basically draw piece of the platform. So it's not terribly difficult, but you have to know the platform. That's the problem.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is just decompile if you've never seen it before. I definitely recommend getting it. It's free.
It's free.
I use it a lot too.
Yeah. When you really want to know what they're doing,
Yeah, exactly.
Why they're doing something, yeah, you can go in there and look, like, oh, that's how they're doing it, right?
Yeah, I did a code review this last week, and they had an encryption DLL that they did all their password hashing with,
Yeah.
and I just decompiled it, and it was sad. I had to write them up on that one. I won't say who it was. Yeah, this is the.
So what they do to actually create this interface, they create custom renders for everything.
Okay.
So they're following their own model. Now they did have a breaking change because the renders were not consistently named across all platforms. So when they came out with 1.1.1, it broke all the code. If you wrote custom renders, you had to rewrite your code.
Oh wow.
But because what happened with you can tell their favorites, which is iOS and Android and Windows, in that order.
Okay.
So you can see which ones they work on the hardest.
Which ones are baked more than others?
Yeah, oh yeah. The Windows one, basically half the classes were internal, so you couldn't do anything.
Right.
So all the methods were internal, so you literally couldn't write a render.
Okay.
Did you notice any difference between the shared project? Did you play the shared project?
I haven't mostly shared projects for my stuff right now. I haven't done any PCL work at all.
Okay. Because I tried using the shared project, and the IntelliSense, I was just smacking my head on the table for that, and it was also slower.
The actual floor?
No, Visual Studio was significantly
I
slower.
haven't had that problem at all, really.
I think because for some reason it was like compiling for 3
Well-
times as opposed to like the pre-compile steps.
There are some issues with ReSharper getting in the way. They've got a couple of issues I've seen. They
Okay.
document with that.
Yeah, that's probably what it is ReSharper.
Yeah, ReSharper is a great tool, but it can, it will go insane occasionally, and you just gotta,
Yeah, I don't know if I will continue using ReSharper if they don't support Roslyn.
it's probably
Huh?
they won't.
They've already said they're not
They're
going
not
to
going
do
to.
it.
Yeah, they're not going to do Roslyn on that resharper.
I don't know. I don't know.
Oh, that's right, because they changed the entire AST.
And that's going to be a killer for them later on down the road. I think Just Code is going to implement Roslyn.
You know, if Just Code had link generation, I would probably use it.
I had a resharper. I just completely disabled it. I didn't like it at all.
Yeah, what's the other one, the CodeRush?
Yeah,
CodeRush.
CodeRush is going to support Roslyn.
I love that product, but God, it made Visual Studio so unstable. Yeah, when it started taking up a gigabyte of RAM and you can't stop it,
Right.
it's just,
I've heard it's gotten a lot better.
has it gotten better?
I don't know. ReSharper used to be like that, and then they implemented like file indexing and all that because they got that dark ReSharper or underscore ReSharper. I don't know which one it is now. And that made it a lot faster. Of course, if you're running on a Rust disk, then it's slower.
Yeah, no, I have several files that are generated, so they're tens of thousands of lines long, and you have to go exclude those because if you make a mistake of opening one up, you know, you lost the one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a client who uses ReSharper just for their testing.
Yeah.
That's it. And it's just, that's the only time I enable ReSharper.
Oh, really?
It's just to run their unit
I've
test.
learned a lot, actually.
Yeah, the
Maybe I
unit,
didn't know what to start with, this part.
Yeah.
their unit test Explorer is a lot better than the built-in one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it is.
I
It is.
do that on
One
Yeah.
problem.
that.
When you open up Visual Studio, it'll reopen all of the test tabs you had from your last session.
Yeah, that's true.
That, I don't like that, yeah.
Small bug, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what they were doing when they rewrote the Test Explorer for Visual Studio. Because it used to actually be nice. And then they just kind of threw everything out the window. So are there any more questions?
Are you using this, you know, you said you might move one of your apps over, but are you doing any other type of development with it? Is anybody doing it before?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Completed the project from, combining iOS with Windows Phone, really listing and like 20 forms. 3 calculators, no specific calculator for our industry, and search list, and some information.
Podcast.
Or